Hello and welcome to Mind the Flat. I'm Tom Crowther.
I'm Chris Heffernan.
And I'm Amy Isles.
And today we're going to be talking about sport. Specifically, what is better, football, rugby or cricket?
Oh.
Sorry for all the basketball lovers out there.
Darts.
Yeah. If you like snooker, we've got nothing for you. We're sticking firmly to the ones that we actually understand and know well. So,
well, some of us understand.
Some of us partially understand. So, to kick us off, we're going to have a chat about our maybe favourite, maybe bizarre, maybe strange sporting moments. So, Amy, do you want to let us know what your sporting moment is?
So my favourite sporting memory is it was last year, and since I've come to uni I've just a bit before uni I started getting into football. My dad's a big Bristol City supporter, so obviously coming to Bristol Uni it's quite convenient. Like I wouldn't say I'm a huge fan, like I don't have a season ticket, but last year we went in the Carabao Cup, we went to see Bristol City play Manchester United. And it was the Christmas holidays had just started, and I went back home, and we weren't sure whether we were gonna go or not, because it meant trekking back down here and then going back home, and we were like, oh, they're gonna lose anyway. But I was like, oh, I'm never probably gonna see them play Manchester United again. Let's go and do it. Let's suffer the journey. And they won 2-1, and honestly,
wow,
the atmosphere was just incredible. It was. I'm a bit gutted because I don't think I'll ever see a match like that again. But it was amazing. And the last goal was scored in the final 2 minutes. I think it might have even been extra time. And the stadium just erupted, went absolutely wild. And we drove home at like 11 o'clock at night, just singing Bristol City songs. It was immense.
See, I've never been to a football game before, and the thought of it absolutely terrifies me.
Oh, well, I went quite a while ago to a Man United v Chelsea, the youth team, at Stamford.
Youth team?
At Stamford Bridge, isn't it?
Yeah.
And so it's only a half-filled stadium. So, you know what I mean, like divide it in half. Not either side of the stadium, but in one corner, basically. And it was terrifying. And that was only a half-filled stadium.
At a youth match.
So noisy and rowdy, and there are seats, but nobody wants to sit on them.
Well, you don't sit down.
So why is there a seat? And
you don't stand for the whole game. Like for the majority of the game, you sit.
No, I was stood for the majority of this game because no one wanted to sit down, and I couldn't understand it.
Normal game.
And it was so noisy and intimidating, and also you can't really see what's going on. Like you get a much better view of football when you watch it at home on the TV.
You want to go to Ashton Gate because they've got the Lansdowne stand, which is only a few years old. Immense view from up there, great view because you're almost looking down onto the pitch. It's quite tall.
But can you still see the people?
Yeah.
Or just dots running around?
You can see the people.
As good as you can on the TV?
Well, obviously not.
Well, there you go.
Like,
all right, okay. I think this
team spirit.
Yeah. Right. We're not even at the debate part yet, and you're already at each other's throats. Okay, Chris. So, what's your sporting memory? I'm looking forward to this.
So, it's years ago now. We were in the garden. My dad and me. I know, Dad and I can't decide now. I was in the garden. I was in the garden with my dad, playing badminton, and it must have been sort of the tail end of August. So the paddling pool was still up at the end of the garden, but it hadn't been gone in for a while. Hadn't sort of been refilled for a while. It was ready to be deflated, emptied out because summer was now over. And I was playing with my back to the paddling pool, and we're playing away, boop, 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 and Dad would hit higher and higher shots, and eventually the inevitable happened as I leaned back to sort of one of my signature badminton shots. So flick it like this. Oh, thinks he's got it too high, and I smashed into the back of the paddling pool and fell backwards, fully clothed, into this slightly stagnant paddling pool full of water.
Well, combining badminton and swimming.
There you go.
Wonderful sports story there.
So there you go. That was...
Was it just you and your dad though, or was it humiliation in front of loads of people.
Mum was stood in the kitchen window watching,
No.
and so she saw me as well.
Didn't have the whole street round to this
No,
match. Then.
no, it was a low key affair.
Just a friendly. Just
Yeah.
a friendly.
It wasn't the street annual World Cup of badminton.
The street annual World Cup. Amazing.
Our world, our street. What about you, Tom?
So mine's a little. I've realised that mine's a little bit boasty. I'm just gonna go for it because
for it.
as a kid I was not sporty at all. I didn't care about anything to do with sports. And so when I went to secondary school, year 7 and year 8, I was put into like the bottom. We had like sets for PE, and I was like the bottom set. We didn't play any real sports. In fact, the only real sport we played was rounders, and
Love
no one
rounders.
took it seriously.
Rounders is
But
brilliant.
we played
Great game.
sports that the PE teachers have made up, and no one cared about teaching us anything about how to play real sports. And so, as a consequence of that, I got put in the bottom set, like BTEC group for PE at GCSE level. And as soon as that happened, I started rowing, and I was training like 4 days a week, like doing loads of cardio work, and no one like knew. They thought I was still this like scrawny little kid. And so, as part of our BTEC thing, we had to do the bleep test about a year into GCSE, and I
Bleep test.
remember just going for it, and absolutely like no, everyone dropped out, and I just kept going and going and going. And I think I ended up with like a score of almost 12 on the bleep test,
Oh, neck.
which for someone that has no sporting history felt pretty good. And yeah.
Well done you.
That's that's why it feels a bit boasty, because I'm kind of like, look at how good I am at running. I'm not anymore. I definitely couldn't do that now. Probably should get back to training.
I managed to always avoid the bleep test.
I don't think we ever did it at our school.
Oh,
I don't know how.
just the sadists at our school then making us do it.
I think the boys did it at our school. Hashtag
Oh.
sexism. But the girls never really did it. We did like dance and hockey and netball. It was, yeah, looking back actually, my school was quite sexist in the PE department.
Wouldn't complain. They're much better sports, hockey and netball, than having to go up against like mountains of guys and playing rugby when you've never played it before.
Did you have to play
remember doing tag
rugby?
rugby.
Yes,
Oh my
full
god.
contact.
You had to play rugby.
We had to
You
do
had to
full-
play rugby.
How did they not snap you?
in PE class. We had to buy a gum shield,
We had to buy
get it
cushions.
fitted,
So, you
and
got
then-
for hockey.
Yeah.
And
And,
then
we did do
play.
one thing of rugby actually.
Okay.
play rugby. And the thing was, there were some people who looked like they could be straight on the professional rugby pitch, that sort of build, going up against me. That was terrifying. It was not fun.
Sounds
You
scary.
mean like Bambi?
Like
I can imagine just like skipping
Yeah.
around.
tag rugby, fine. Everyone can play that. Full contact rugby and PE, no thank
Are
you.
you quick?
Yeah.
I could stick you on the wings then. You'd be
Yeah,
fine.
maybe.
If I just had to
Off your
run, that
ruck.
would be fine.
Yeah, pretty much can just get away with that, maybe. If you just try not to get in any rucks.
Yeah.
So I'm basically Forrest Gump.
Pretty much. You're the line of last
Chris,
resort.
Run!
Oh, brilliant. Boom, boom, boom. Mind the flat. Boom, boom, boom.
Right, so for transparency, given that football is the only one that we all know pretty much all the rules to, let's start with that. So, Chris, football.
I think all I have to say is summer 2018, and that hands down establishes football as a phenomenal sport. And I think one of the key things about football is it can get everyone enthused, and I think more so than any other sport. So, like, I'm not a big sport follower. I'm quite happy to watch football, and so this is another thing I'd say. Football is really easy to watch and understand what's going on. So for anyone, I think you can turn it on, okay, and this team are trying to score in that goal, and this team are scoring in that goal, and they kick the ball, and unless someone kicks someone, or it goes out of the lines, all is okay.
Offside.
But even that is... I don't get the whole thing of trying to explain the offside rule to girls, because
Whoa, okay.
it really...
See, I don't find the offside rule that difficult.
It's
to
not that
understand.
complicated. That's what I mean. There's this saying, isn't there? Oh, trying to explain the offside rule to girls. Yeah, look at how manly we are. It's really not a complicated concept.
No.
If you pass the ball past the last few defenders to a player who stood the other side of the defenders,
it's offside.
you're offside.
Yeah, but I'm just saying that doesn't fit into you can just turn the TV on and watch it, whatever's happening, because there will be things that will happen that you don't understand.
No, maybe, yeah.
And also, like what constitutes a foul and what doesn't, in terms of
tricky.
like you can send the player to the ground, but if you get the ball first, it's a completely legal foul.
But I think you can just sort of
Not foul, tackle.
I say you can see that more. Like there are very obvious bats. And in every sport, you've got those grady areas where you have to have read the rules. But I'd say in football, a complex understanding of the rules is probably less limited. But the phenomenon that is football is that it just gets everyone going. Like, because you have the World Cup is huge, and it's obviously global. Everywhere around the world, people get behind football. And if we just looked at England last summer, people that maybe have never watched football before were singing "It's Coming Home." They're there watching the TV. You have your barbecue. You've got all your friends around. You're organising an event purely based around are England going to the next round, and it's exciting.
See, I feel like this might just be your world. Like people in your life are interested in it, because like my family couldn't care less. I'm pretty sure at one point I was watching an England match at home and my dad was cheering for the other team just because he wanted it all to stop.
Yeah.
So I don't think it's actually as universal as you're kind of claiming it is. Especially
I'm talking comparatively. Obviously, not everybody is going to enjoy the Football World Cup, but I'd say compared to almost, and I would say all other sports, football gets the biggest sort of wahey.
I love that description.
Please go to like the Manchester Derby or something and just stand there and go wahey in that way. See how everyone reacts.
Than all the other sports. I think it has a really infectious atmosphere, and it really gets out there. And so I think it's sort of got this big globe. It gets a phenomenon. There's a big energy around it. And I'd say that for the everyday person, it's a pretty easy sport to watch. And my final point, I'm going to do a 3-point thing to introduce football.
3-point thing?
Would be, it's pretty easy to play. Like, it is the sport that I think brings so many people together. I can remember as a child, we went on the street and all these children from all different houses came out, well, let's play football. And we played football on the street. Much to the annoyance of people's wing mirrors and aerials, and then we got moved to the park. But it was something that most people can kick a ball, and it's a team game, and everyone can get involved. And so I think it has that effect that I'm not the best footballer, but I actually really love playing it for fun.
So that's where my arguments against football, we'll start off with this one, is that I was quite sporty at school, but football was the one sport I could never pick up. I was hopeless at it, and you both know how competitive I am, and I hated it for that reason, because I just couldn't do it. I was no good with my feet, and I don't know why, because I used to dance, and I'm fairly coordinated, but football was one sport I never found it exciting to play. I was never particularly good at it. I just could not get into it.
Football's the one sport for me that I never really tried. Like going back to the not being sporty at all, I kept trying different sports. I did cricket for a bit. I did rugby for a bit.
Yeah, I was very similar.
But I never did football. Really? I don't know why actually.
Yeah.
I think it's just that. I think this is the thing. Like the people that I knew that were like the football people were not the sort of people that I wanted to hang around with.
Well, I think that's the thing.
That's going on to my
it's the
next
cool. It's the cool guy sport, I think, and in that way, definitely, I can remember playing it at school, and just in the playground and stuff, and you do feel a bit like, I'm not really part of this crowd. I can remember each class used to go against. There were 3 Year 6 classes, and one refused to play with the rest of us. So they just have their own football game going on, and they wouldn't have anything to do with the other two. And then the other two classes would go against each other. But it does have that element of if you haven't got the skills to start with, it's a bit like, can I get involved?
And this is my other argument against football, is that it is so male dominated. I think part of the reason that I don't go to many games is because I wouldn't feel comfortable going on my own, because crowds can get very aggressive, It can get quite violent at times, especially if it's a local derby. And those matches are often the most exciting, but you don't want to put yourself, as a woman, you don't want to put yourself in those situations in a male-dominated environment where you could get hurt. And I feel like the perception of both women spectators and women in football is much less than that of males.
And pundits as well.
Yeah,
like there are some
absolutely.
exceptional female pundits for football, but they always get abuse on Twitter and whatnot, just for the fact that they are women. I mean, there's the referee or the official that does the line running. I can't remember her name, but she.
Yeah, I know who you mean. I can't
Sean
remember her
Massey,
name.
I think her name is.
I think you're right.
Yeah, I think she got a load of stick as well, just for being a woman. Nothing else, just running the lines, but.
Yeah, that is what puts me off, because I love going to watch football games, and I would love to be able to, and I feel like any of you three could go like, oh, fancy going to watch the football this weekend, and go without an issue, whereas I have to think, hang on, is it an evening game? If it's on a weekend, if it's the afternoon, I could feel slightly more inclined to go, because and then walking back on my own in the dark, that is a complete no-go. But also I feel like rugby crowds are less aggressive, because it might be that it is slightly less popular, but I think that is an advantage of it, because football attracts so many men. There's more chance almost of something dodgy happening to you, whereas rugby crowds are, I mean, they're not small by any means, but they are slightly smaller, and I think the atmosphere at rugby games is slightly more protective almost.
They're also mixed crowds as well. You've got both teams sitting with one another, and so there's less of an environment for kind of, this is us, this is you, and then when we come together at the end of the match, God knows what's going to happen, because
exactly.
You're all there all together.
Yeah, I think that makes a big difference.
It makes a huge difference. I've been to rugby games and I've been sat next to a fan of the opposite team, and you'll have that. It encourages that banter, I think, that then doesn't get aggressive. Whereas because you are so segregated in football, and then they clash together at the end and it explodes.
So Amy, tell us why the positive reasons why rugby is the best sport.
I think it strikes a nice balance between the camaraderie of a football crowd, but it doesn't get as aggressive. And obviously, inherently, it is quite a dangerous sport, because contact is a part of it and is a very prominent part of it. But I feel like within the spectators, that aggression doesn't really come out.
I guess because you're looking at it and you're watching it, and you don't have to feel like you don't need to take part in it. It's already happening down there, and it kind of dissipates that energy, that kind of more violent energy away. Yeah,
and I feel like in a similar way to the World Cup, the Six Nations is, everyone gets really riled up about it. Not quite to the extent of the World Cup, because it's only in Europe, but it's a massive event, and it is yearly as well.
I'd still say that, though, even if you looked in this country, the atmosphere around the Six Nations, I don't think is comparable to the atmosphere around the World Cup.
But I think that's because the Six Nations,
or the Rugby World Cup, neither of those rugby events create the same atmosphere and sort of national energy, if we're just looking at this country where we've got experiences, as football tournaments do.
No, I don't think it does, but I think within the rugby community, it maybe doesn't bring in as many people as the World Cup does, but I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. I think rugby has its own benefits on a smaller scale.
I guess another thing as well is that as a consequence of that lower level of general popularity, is that money doesn't play such a massive role in rugby. It's a lot more kind of.
I don't know if I agree with you there, to be honest, because Bristol is a very funded rugby. Bristol Bears, they have a lot of money, and I think that is a large part of the reason they are doing well at the minute. But then again,
but money always plays a part.
Yeah,
you can't take money out of it. But you're not looking at.
Oh, it's not. Yeah, not to
the
same
kind
level
of
football.
Millions and millions of pounds or whatever of transfer fees that you see in football. That just doesn't happen. And so and I think you get a lot more kind of homegrown talent in,
absolutely,
in rugby and cricket as well.
Yeah.
Whereas you don't really get that in football
I think
as
that's
much.
a massive advantage. If you look at the Premier League clubs in football, look at the percentage of foreign players to English players. If you look at the Premiership in rugby, it's a totally different statistic.
And
So how lovely.
But that
Football's more international and inclusive.
But that wouldn't be a problem if it wasn't for the fact that we're not sending our players abroad. I mean, I can think of, I guess when you're looking at Britain in general, we've got Gareth Bale at Real Madrid, and you've got Jadon Sancho at Borussia Dortmund. Other than that, I'm struggling to think of anyone else that's a high-profile player that is abroad from the UK. And I think if it was going both ways, then it would be international. But I think it shows the fact that like we aren't doing enough around football development in order to get young people kind of trained in the way that they would be on like a international level. So.
And I think rugby has that international aspect to it as well, but I think it's on a more balanced level. Like Pat Lam, who's the Bristol coach, I think he's from New Zealand. Charles Piatel, one of our best players, is Samoan, I think. We've got a lot of international players, but it's balanced with some homegrown talent. A lot of people from the local area who've come up through the academy. And it's the same with Bristol City in the Championship. I think in the lower level clubs of football, you do get that homegrown talent, but as soon as you get up to the Premiership, it's blown out of the water.
Is there something about? Obviously, I'm not a massive football expert, but sort of, I don't know. But is English football just particularly attractive place to play?
Oh, so the Premier League is probably the best league in the world.
So there are a lot of English players. And I think, like, since the World Cup, I'm always spotting members of the England team in high-profile positions or important in English teams. And so is it more that they're not so spread out internationally or we don't see them as much because it's not as prominent, that those teams, that football following isn't as prominent. Whereas here,
I don't think so.
You want to come and join English teams because this is the best teams to be part of.
I disagree. I think it's definitely the best league, but I wouldn't necessarily say that all the best teams are found in this country. Like, it's definitely a more competitive league, but looking at like Spain, you've got Madrid and you've got Barcelona, and then Italy, you've got Milan, Juventus, Germany, you've got Bayern Munich and Dortmund and whatnot. And so you have got some really strong teams, but we're not seeing our homegrown players playing over there.
Yeah.
So going back to rugby then.
Okay.
Yeah.
We sort of breezed over the fact that football crowds are very dangerous. Well, you didn't breeze over that fact, the violence of football crowds, but obviously that is not ingrained in football. So that is something that you could work on. It is not like the rules of football do not make that happen. However, in rugby, the rules of rugby do result in very serious injuries. I read an article very recently about sort of the way the game is changing, and it's becoming even more about contact, and so the size of players is increasing, and some of the forces are the same as sort of being in a car crash without a seatbelt on. That's sort of the level of collisions that are happening, and that's in the rules of rugby.
But you also have rules to protect players from that. You have rules like about high tackling, and I think a lot of the rules in rugby are superior to football rules, especially in terms of fouls, because some fouls in football are very dangerous, maybe not to the extent of rugby, but I think you get penalised more in rugby for fouls. You've got the sin bin, which I think is a great rule. And if you look at professional fouls in rugby as opposed to football, I think there are a lot less because of those rules. And also,
but rugby is still a very serious, dangerous sport. But that
is the nature of the sport.
But is that okay?
But people are signing themselves up for it.
Yeah.
So it's not like people are being forced to go play rugby. It's like giving the ultimatum between, do you go play football or do you go play rugby? Like, these people are putting themselves in that position where they want to do that because they're good at it, and that's something they want to excel at. If you didn't want to get hurt, you wouldn't go play rugby. You probably wouldn't play a sport at all.
And it's the skill as well. They're trained to play skillfully so that they don't get injured.
But sort of, I think what this article was sort of leaning towards is, and what sort of noticing on sort of it in Europe as well, is this nature of almost some skill is leaving the game as it more becomes about brute force in tackles, and that was something this article was sort of raising. I think some of the rules, or there's been proposals to change rules to rugby to sort of stop this from dominating the sport.
Then surely there are ways, because you said that the good thing about football is that it's ingrained within the sport, but if there are rules,
so rugby would have to change.
Yeah, exactly. But look at there's a lot of stuff going around head injuries in football now, and especially now young people heading the ball, and that's having negative repercussions and long-term effects. And so that's another thing that football needs to look at, and there's potential for rule changes there. And so there's always going to be issues, especially in a sport, especially in a competitive game where people are athletic and are pushing themselves. You're going to see these injuries. And
I think on the note of rules, going off on a little bit of a tangent, I think the respect for the rules, and especially the respect for the referee in rugby, is far, far greater than that in football. Almost, I think it's starting on rugby now to go a little bit too far. I think referees in rugby are starting to get a little bit too much power in some games. But in comparison to football, I think that's a very good thing. I think that encourages respectfulness in the fans as well.
What about in comparison to cricket then? We haven't talked much about it, so let's bring that in now then.
It's so boring.
Oh, I knew this was coming. Here we go. Chris thinks it's boring.
Okay, I'm just going to start your discussion off with cricket.
Okay, so I'm not even allowed to present my own...
I want you to go with this, because this quote made me laugh. This is what George Bernard Shaw wrote about cricket, Tom. The English people are not very spiritual, so they invented cricket to give them some idea of eternity.
Okay, so I can see that Chris is definitely thinking about Test cricket here, first class cricket. I actually, personally, and I know this isn't necessarily the prevailing opinion, I actually prefer Test cricket. So to kind of give people that aren't cricket fans a bit of an understanding, Test cricket is usually played over 5 days. It involves... Shut up. It involves one team... So whoever wins the toss chooses whether they bat first or bowl first. Then one team will bat, and then the other team will bowl, and then they'll swap. And then they'll do it again, and then swap again. So they have 2 tries at batting and 2 tries at bowling. And it's effectively who can end the game with the highest amount of runs. And I think the great thing about this is that it is so strategic in a way that football and rugby just can't be, because they're so physical and there's so much pace built into the game. You can't be as strategic about the very specific ways that you're doing things. And I think for me, being kind of I don't know, I'm a little bit more like strategically. Yeah, exactly. And I love the stats. There's so many great stats that come out of cricket, and there's a lot more I guess it's a lot more slow-paced in a lot of instances with Test, but that allows you to kind of take things in a bit more and have a bit more of a think about them, and then also back to the aggression thing. It kind of really suppresses the level of people. So me and the other flatmate. Hopefully, if the weather's nice next weekend, we're gonna go down to Taunton and watch a game, and the day before we're gonna prepare a little picnic, and we're gonna go have a few beers, and you can just kind of take a picnic with you. And for me,
you can really make a day out of it.
I'm a little bit of a granddad.
Yeah.
And I'm really looking forward to it, because I'm just gonna sit, drink, and eat Scotch eggs and cake.
Well, it's very sophisticated, isn't it?
I wouldn't necessarily say sophisticated,
but you could have a picnic. You don't need to watch cricket to be able to have a picnic.
Yeah, but the cricket enhances the picnic.
Yeah.
It makes it better. There's something else to do, and I'm really looking forward to it. I mean, I can't say it's going to be great because I've never been before. This is my first time, but
I think you'll really enjoy it. I think my preference would be ODIs, one-day internationals.
Yeah.
Which are, so to kind of expand on what Tom said, for those who don't know about cricket, you've got the 3 formats. You've got Test cricket, then you've got ODIs, which take place over one day, and there's 50 overs. So there's a limited amount of balls that are bowled. And then you've got 2020, which is even more condensed. So you've only got 20 balls that are bowled.
20 overs.
20 overs, sorry, yeah. And like I started off by watching. My parents used to take me and one of my friends and their family went as well to 2020s when I was little. And then I've been to a couple of ODIs. I don't think I've ever done a test match, actually. That's the next on my list.
Well, I think that's the great thing as well, is that people like me that are boring and love stats can go watch their Test cricket. People that love a fast-paced game where people are whacking it for sixes, then you can go to a T20 match, and the stadiums are a lot more packed. It's not the sort of place you take a picnic, but it's the sort of place where you can get really excited about something. And so there are kind of 3 formats for 3 different types.
Isn't that almost sort of making them into different sports?
I guess so. But why is that a bad thing? It means that it makes cricket more versatile. You can do that with football.
But then do you need... you need fast cricket, because other cricket's really slow and boring. Whereas football, it's just football. You just watch it, it's great fun. People enjoy watching it. It's easy to watch. I mean, cricket, I just looked up some words. You've got a googly, a Chinaman, a short leg.
Fantastic.
Okay, they sound brilliant. But I've not got a clue. Someone says foul.
Mid off. That's another one.
If someone says foul, we all go, in either sport, it's a foul. Okay, we're all good. Goal! Brilliant! It's a goal. All the things that are being shouted in a cricket match, I'm sitting there thinking, whoa, I haven't got a clue. And then the umpire puts his arms out like here, he's pointing to these emergency fire exits on the plane. Who knows what's going on?
Looks like he's telling someone off sometimes.
That to me is the thing. That, yes, you've got wonderful all these different types of cricket. There's still quite a lot of complicated bit. We've had the slog and football is simpler.
Yeah, but I guess there are. I'm not going to say that cricket isn't more complicated than at least football. I know rugby's got some quite complicated rules. I remember watching a video. I think it was like Lawrence Deladio was on, and he said even I at one point playing at top flight rugby just didn't really know what all the rules were, and so just deferred to the ref all the time. But yeah, I think, if you look at T20 in its purest form, you're hitting a ball for as many runs as you can. So you either run or you get it over the boundary, make loads of points, and if you get caught out or run out, you're gone. Or I guess LBW. That's probably the confusing one.
I don't think that's.
But you can still get excited about it. I think, regardless of whether.
Yeah.
Regardless of whether you understand every single rule, and I think that's the same. That's how I take rugby most of the time. Is that I don't know all the rules, but I know roughly most of them. I feel.
I suppose the thing for me would then be that obviously each of our 3 sports are very different. I think probably rugby and football are similar.
Are we going to conclude that they've all got their own merits?
No. I'm not actually going to say that.
Okay, here we go then.
I would say that I think they have got that. You've got the strategic game.
I'm not going to say that. But they do have all their own merits.
But I'd say that what distinguishes, the key, I would argue, distinguisher between the 3 is that football brings in fans from another camp altogether at certain times, which I don't think you see the same thing necessarily. I think cricket has its cricket fans, and football has its football fans, and rugby has its rugby fans. But to me, the key distinguisher across them is this thing that happens, and to me, I only really see it happening around football to a larger extent, where suddenly all these other people get involved in football on occasion, not all the time, but on occasion.
I think I'm going to side with you on this one about football. Is that it's a lot more accessible for people. Like cricket, really, you need a cricket bat, you need a ball, you need probably some padding and a helmet if you're playing hardball cricket. Whereas in this country, it's not really done. Like, you don't have those open spaces to play it as well a lot of the time. Like, you can play football in the street, as you said. You can't really play cricket in the street unless you want to take someone's window out. And
Can you imagine
you definitely
playing
can't
cricket in the
play
street?
contact rugby on the street either, otherwise you'll end up with no scalp. But yeah, I think that's the advantage that football has.
Do you think we should probably just put a safety message out that it is advisable not to play football on the street near moving cars? It is best to play it in a safe green area.
Nah.
Thank you very much for listening.
And if you want to get in contact, you can find us on Facebook. We're Mind the Flat Podcast.
On Twitter, we're at mindtheflat_pod.
And Instagram at mindtheflat_podcast.
And if you want to respond to anything we've said in this episode or suggest a topic for another week, you can head to our Reddit. That's r/mindtheflat.
Or alternatively, you can drop us an email at mindtheflatpodcast@gmail.com.